Inclusion and pre-service teacher training. I'm going to start with looking at some of the challenges of inclusion that teachers meet in the classroom on a day-to-day basis. The European Agency on the Development of Special Needs Education reports that dealing with differences and diversity is one of the greatest challenges facing schools across Europe. We can translate that to Canadian schools very easily, I believe. It looks at barriers to learning and participation arise from existing organizational structures, inflexible or irrelevant curricula, inappropriate systems of assessment and examination, and negative attitudes about some children's potential. And this is the important part that drew my attention. It is argued that these barriers are exacerbated by inadequate preparation of teachers, particularly in the area of special needs and for working in inclusive schools. I found that in my initial teacher training that most special needs were considered the area or the expertise of the special needs teacher, and if you wanted to teach that sort of thing, then you would take those classes and not the ones that I was taking. So I find it interesting in this class looking towards what we're learning and how it should have been part of my initial teacher training. In Aberdeen, Scotland, at the university there, they have created the Inclusive Practice Project. It began in their School of Education, and it began in response to the increasing diversity of Scottish schools, the underachievement of certain pupils, including those with additional support needs, and the need for teachers prepared for such classrooms. Scottish schools face a period of unprecedented change and development. Although many things are done well in Scottish education, the long tail of underachievement and the lack of participation for certain groups is a chronic problem. There are additional challenges associated with demographic changes in the population of schools, associated with migration, disability, and first language spoken. Schools also have to deal with changes in the curriculum, new approaches to assessment, new understandings of how children learn, new developments in inclusive pedagogy, and demands for multi-agency working. All of these changes have implications for how teachers are prepared and supported. The task of initial teacher education is to prepare new teachers to enter a profession that accepts individual and collective responsibility for improving the learning and participation of all children, taking account that there will be differences between pupils. To this end, the Inclusive Practice Project, or IPP, in the School of Education, University of Aberdeen, has been developing and studying new approaches to training teachers to ensure that they have a greater awareness of understanding of the educational and social problems/issues that can affect children's learning, and have developed strategies they can use to support and deal with such difficulties. I believe that a lot of the things that the University of Aberdeen School of Education is looking at are things that are also going to be facing our teachers here in Canada, or are already. The Inclusive Practice Project adopted the position that inclusive education should not be thought of as a denial of individual differences, but an accommodation of them within the structures and processes that are available to all learners. In other words, it should be a normal part of a school's response when pupils experience difficulties. The IPP embraced the view that all learners are not the same, and human differences should not be ignored or denied. In 2006, the School of Education at the University of Aberdeen began to reform their PGDE towards an inclusive practice curriculum for students who had already graduated with an acceptable degree. And here you can see all of the things that went into that program. If we make it bigger here, you can see that there are most courses are together, primary and secondary. They don't make the distinction between elementary, middle school, high school. This is mostly a collection of classes and courses that you take together because they're good throughout the curriculum. Okay, let's just take that down. Okay. Now, the postgraduate diploma in education supports the learning that occurs in schools with a curriculum incorporating professional and theoretical knowledge, keeping in mind that such knowledge can be inconsistent with practice in schools. So what you're taught in university may not be what you see in the school. I think we've probably all had that experience. The program is also designed to support students in engaging in critical and reflective practice to help them make sense of their school experience. Now, this is, of course, talking about those student teachers, the ones that have graduated with a previous degree and are working towards becoming an educator. So it's the PGDE program has been very closely and carefully created in order to really support what goes on in and out of the university. This is an overlying framework of what is studied when and what is meant to be learned throughout the year in the postgraduate diploma. So you can see that there's three main areas: the becoming an active professional, understanding social justice, and understanding learning. Those three areas were considered very important, really the key areas when determining how to provide an inclusive curriculum for the graduates. So you can see that they have the context. Oops, didn't mean to move that. In each they have the context, the learner at the center of the theme, and the teacher's role, and it's really interestingly laid out so that you can really see what you're supposed to be doing at each stage of the game. Down here, every day is an exception. I think that's something you almost always learn in the classroom within the first week, that there is no normal day. It's important for us all to know that all children can learn, that everyone is an exception, and all children are different, that there aren't children with disabilities, there are children with additional support needs, and that at some point in your education career, everyone is going to be a student with an additional support need. While some of the language may be different, many of the challenges facing Scottish schools can be directly translated to Canadian schools and education practitioners. Likewise, a postgraduate diploma in education, structured like the one from the University of Aberdeen, would be useful and productive. One further challenge we face in Canada is that all our provinces govern education separately, and therefore having one curriculum like Scotland's Curriculum for Excellence would be very challenging to create nationwide. It is already difficult moving provinces as a teacher due to different qualification standards for teachers. So how would a diploma be registered, scaled, recognized? Just as in Scotland, major reform would have to take place in government education policy, teacher education programs, school divisions, and curriculum before such a broad project could be successful. Here are my references that I used in creating the presentation. I used initially Anada's article of Equity and Social Justice in Teaching and Teacher Education, which led me to the article by Florian and Roos, the Inclusive Practice Project in Scotland, Teacher Education for Inclusive Education, and which led me to look up the final report of the same Inclusive Practice Project. And so much in the two articles is the same. However, there are some key findings and such, and additional research, obviously, that went into the 2012 report.